Welcome to Gate of AI. Have you ever stopped in the middle of your workday, maybe while you're toggling between like five different tabs and wrestling with a stubborn piece of software, and just asked yourself a question?
Yeah, like why isn't this working?
Right, exactly. Or more specifically, how often do my tech tools actually understand what I am trying to achieve? Not just blindly executing the keystrokes,
Mhm.
but genuinely grasping the actual goal you are aiming for.
Well, we spend an enormous amount of our day acting as translators, really.
Translators, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, we have these complex, nuanced human goals, and we are forced to break them down into the rigid syntax a machine can actually process. You aren't just doing your job, you are managing a machine's inability to understand context.
That translation process is exactly where the friction lives, and today's deep dive is digging into a potential end to that specific kind of friction.
That's a bold claim.
It is. We're exploring this fascinating April 10th, 2026 article from Gate of AI that details Meta's brand new launch. It's an AI model called Muse Spark.
Muse Spark, right?
Right. And our mission today is to figure out what Meta actually means when they call this a, quote, personal
Which
superintelligence.
sounds like a lot of marketing.
Oh, totally. We want to know if this is just another flashy tech buzzword or if we are looking at a fundamental shift in how you will work and interact with technology moving forward.
And looking at the source material,
Yeah.
the architectural choices Meta is making suggest this isn't just an incremental update.
All
I
right.
mean, they aren't just trying to make a model 5% faster or marginally more accurate at generating text. The stated goal here is a complete paradigm shift in human AI alignment.
Wow.
Yeah, the way MuseSpark is built could completely reset industry standards for what we expect from our digital tools.
So the timeline here is super fresh. Muse Spark launched just a couple of days ago on April 8th, 2026.
Very recent.
Yeah, and it's the inaugural model coming out of a newly established group. They're calling it Meta Superintelligence Labs.
Right, which is quite a name.
It is, and the sources highlight that their primary design goal is to prioritize people by aligning closely with human intent and societal interests.
Which is interesting timing.
Okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like we're moving away from treating AI as this, all-knowing oracle on a mountaintop that we have to carefully approach with the perfect question.
Right?
And instead, we're moving toward a highly competent coworker who actually sits beside you and understands your personal workflow.
That Oracle on the Mountaintop model is actually the perfect lens for how we have interacted with large language models up until now.
Yeah, you have to literally hike up the mountain.
Exactly, meaning you engineer the absolute perfect prompt, you present your offering, and the Oracle hands down a generalized answer.
And usually the oracle doesn't actually know you.
No, it has no concept of your current project or your company's operational constraints or even your personal working style. It is just generating a response based on a massive anonymized ocean of data. But Meta is attempting a major strategic pivot here. I mean, they are launching Muse Spark into a landscape completely dominated by the massive strides OpenAI and Google have made.
Oh, for sure. The market is completely saturated with oracles right now.
And public scrutiny over the role of AI is at an all-time high. There is immense consumer and regulatory anxiety regarding AI behaving unpredictably or operating as a black box.
So Meta is leaning into that.
Yeah, by specifically marketing a model built from the ground up for ethical consideration and tight human alignment. It's a calculated bet.
A bet that the next mode isn't just raw power.
Exactly. They are betting that the next major strategic advantage won't just be raw computational power or parameter count. The next mode is trust and alignment.
Makes sense.
They want to provide a direct answer to the anxiety of turning over your sensitive workflows to an unpredictable machine.
Because trust is the only way you actually give a tool access to your messy daily reality, right?
100%.
If you are going to let a system read your emails or analyze your unreleased products or manage your calendar, you cannot have a rogue agent making guesses. You need a partner.
And getting a machine to act like a partner requires a completely different kind of processing.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. If Muse Spark is supposed to act like an aligned coworker, how is its brain wired differently to actually achieve that?
Right, we have to look under the hood.
Because the article points to advanced pre-training methods and new architectural paradigms.
Yes, and those distinctions under the hood are what separate the marketing buzzwords from the actual engineering.
Okay, but are things like non-autoregressive architectures and world models just fancy jargon? Or does this mean we are finally moving past the era of AI acting like a glorified, highly confident autocomplete?
Well, let's break down the jargon. The sources explicitly mention world models, non-autoregressive architectures, and memory-augmented models.
Right, and most of our listeners know the drill with traditional autoregressive
The
models.
autocomplete era.
Exactly. It's sophisticated probability just guessing the next token. It predicts that after peanut butter and, the next word is statistically likely to be jelly.
Yeah, but Muse Spark claims to use a non-autoregressive architecture.
So how does breaking that token by token chain actually give the AI better reasoning?
Think about how an autoregressive model builds a house. It lays down one brick, looks at that brick, and then guesses where the next brick should go based on statistical patterns of other houses.
Building sequentially.
Right, which means it might get halfway through building a wall before it realizes there is no structural support for a roof.
Oh, and then it either hallucinates Mazar roof or the logic simply collapses.
Exactly. But a non-autoregressive architecture doesn't build brick by brick. It drafts the entire blueprint simultaneously.
Wait, all at once?
Yeah, it evaluates the entire context of your prompt, the goal, and the desired output all at once before it generates a single piece of text or code.
So it can look at the blueprint, realize a load-bearing wall is missing, and fix the structure before it ever presents the final result to you.
Precisely. The reasoning happens globally rather than linearly.
It's mapping out the solution rather than talking its way into a solution.
That is a great way to put it.
That makes sense. But the article also heavily leans on the term world models. If it's looking at the whole blueprint, what is the world model adding to that process?
Well, a world model means the AI has been trained to develop a conceptual, structural understanding of how things relate to each other in reality.
Like physics and logic.
Yes, it is grasping causality, logic, physics, and even human behavior. When an older model generates a marketing plan, it is just stringing together words that frequently appear together in business articles.
Right, it doesn't actually know what marketing is.
But a world model understands the underlying mechanics of what a marketing plan is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you ask Muse Spark to help you plan a physical product launch, it grasps that manufacturing requires lead time, that shipping involves physical logistics, and that a delay in step A causes a bottleneck in step C.
So it isn't just generating text, it is running a simulation of reality and reporting the results back to you.
Exactly. It has a structural understanding of the dependencies.
It knows a physical object cannot be in two places at once, which a pure language model doesn't inherently know unless it has seen text stating it.
Right. And then you combine that structural understanding with the memory-augmented models, the article points out, and the machine starts to become individualized.
Because it remembers you.
It maintains a persistent state of your past interactions. It learns the formatting you prefer for your reports, the specific coding libraries your team uses, and the tone of your emails.
And that continuous feedback loop is what builds the personal aspect of the personal superintelligence.
You nailed it.
All of this reasoning power and memory sounds incredibly potent. But the source material places a massive, almost overriding emphasis on this concept of steerability.
Steerability is key here.
They explicitly state the architecture is designed to prioritize efficiency and steerability to ensure transparency and accountability.
Yes.
So if the model is already so smart, why is steerability such a core focus for Meta's labs?
Because an AI that is incredibly capable but impossible to control is essentially useless in a professional environment. Scalability is the direct antidote to the black box problem.
Okay, I see.
In traditional models, if the AI gives you an output that violates your company's brand guidelines or makes a logical error, it is incredibly difficult to go into the neural network and tweak that specific behavior without retraining massive portions of the model.
Right, you just kind of have to prompt it again and hope.
Yeah. High steerability means developers and users have granular control over the AI's operating parameters.
So you can clearly define the boundaries,
Yeah.
and more importantly, you can audit the reasoning.
Exactly.
If Muse Spark is drafting a legally binding contract or generating a data analysis that you're presenting to your board, you can't just shrug and say, well, the algorithm said so.
No, you absolutely can't.
Yeah.
The ability to audit the reasoning is the foundation of accountability. If the model is drafting that contract, steerability allows you to ask the model to expose the specific legal precedents it referenced in its world model to arrive at those clauses.
Oh, that is huge.
It connects directly back to Meta's goal of aligning with human intent. You can course correct the model dynamically, ensuring its output stay firmly within the bounds of your specific project constraints.
The article also notes that Muse Spark is built for seamless integration and interoperability within Meta's broader AI ecosystem.
Right, it's not a siloed app you have to open,
It's a framework developers can build into the tools you are already using every day.
which is crucial for adoption.
But, steerability and interoperability only matter if people actually fundamentally change how they work. So what does this all mean for you and your job?
That is the big question.
If Meta wants to bake this into our daily routines, how does a highly steerable, memory-augmented AI actually change what your 9 to 5 looks like?
The organizational implications are vast, frankly. The sources highlight a recent investor call where CEO Mark Zuckerberg explicitly outlined that this AI-native tooling is meant to reshape work dynamics.
In what way?
The stated goal is to elevate individual contributors and to flatten team structures, theoretically increasing productivity and making work more engaging.
Flatten team structures. I mean, for decades, the structure of a company has been dictated entirely by the limits of human bandwidth.
Right.
You have a manager who oversees a team of specialists, a designer, a copywriter, a coder, a data analyst.
And that hierarchy exists because one person cannot master all those domains.
Exactly. And more importantly, one person cannot produce that much sheer output in an 8-hour day.
But this raises an important point. A single person with a well-aligned personal superintelligence changes that math entirely.
Because the AI becomes their team.
Yeah. The individual contributor suddenly has the capacity to execute across multiple domains. The AI removes the friction of having to coordinate with 5 different departments.
It's less like managing a team of automated specialists and more like having a universal API for your own brain.
I love that analogy.
You have the strategic intent, and Muse Spark routes that intent into functional code, graphic design, or marketing copy without you having to change your own language. You don't have to put in a ticket to the IT department or wait for the design team's weekly sprint.
The bottleneck shifts from execution to ideation. If the machine can execute the code perfectly based on its world model and its memory of your preferences, your entire job becomes refining your intent.
Wait, but Zuckerberg is pitching a flat team as this productivity utopia that makes work more engaging.
Right.
But if I don't need to collaborate with my peers because my Muse Spark model can do the design, the coding, and the writing, aren't we just creating a company of isolated silos?
That is a very real concern.
I feel like I'd lose the human friction that actually creates good ideas.
Yeah.
If I never have to argue with a designer about a terrible layout choice I made, my terrible layout choice just gets optimized and published.
And that is the inherent dual-edged nature of removing friction. We tend to view all workplace friction as a negative. The endless status meetings, the waiting on other departments.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah, and removing logistical friction absolutely frees you up to focus on strategy. But human collaboration isn't just a logistical necessity.
Right. It is the engine of cognitive diversity.
Exactly. When you debate a colleague, that friction forces you to reevaluate your base assumptions. An AI designed specifically to align perfectly with your intent might just act as a highly sophisticated echo chamber.
It executes my ideas flawlessly, even if the premise of my idea is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah. Companies will have to actively design entirely new frameworks for human-to-human collaboration because the technology will no longer force us to interact just to get the basic components of a project completed.
So leaders will have to be intentional about creating spaces for debate, critique, and cognitive friction.
Otherwise, flattening the org chart just creates thousands of highly efficient, completely isolated production lines.
Which brings us to the crucial caveat the article provides, right? Because Meta can engineer the most brilliant world models, and they can prioritize human alignment in their superintelligence labs.
Yes, but
But the source clearly states that the true test of Muse Spark isn't the architecture under the hood or the impressive launch metrics. The real test is how effectively it can be integrated into existing systems and adapt to the incredibly diverse needs of users worldwide.
technology behaves very differently in a sanitized laboratory environment, tightly aligned with the intent of the engineers who built it.
Of course.
When you deploy a memory-augmented AI globally to millions of individual contributors, you are introducing it to wildly different workflows, cultural contexts, and definitions of what a good outcome actually looks like.
So true.
The concept of alignment is easy to define in a mission statement. It is incredibly messy to execute across the global workforce.
It forces the entire industry to watch closely. If Muse Spark succeeds in acting as a true coworker rather than an autocomplete oracle, the baseline expectation for every piece of software we use changes overnight.
It sets a benchmark that raw intelligence is no longer enough. The intelligence must be steerable, auditable, and deeply contextualized to the individual user.
As we wrap up this deep dive from Meta's new lab, through the complex world model architecture, all the way to the potential flattening of your workplace org chart, I want to leave you with a lingering question to ponder.
A reality check.
Exactly. As you head back to your own desk, your own tabs, and your own workflows today, we spent this entire time talking about how Muse Spark is engineered to perfectly align with human intent.
Yes.
But if Muse Spark perfectly aligns with human intent and adapts to our personal workflows, what happens when our intent is flawed or our workflow is terrible?
That is the million-dollar question.
Will a personal superintelligence elevate our potential, or will it just perfectly optimize our bad habits?
That is the defining challenge of the next era of personal computing.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those big questions, keep examining the tools you use every day, and we'll catch you next time.